Admiral Caddy Sullivan appeared on Commander Vexthul's main screen, her face calm but her eyes burning with cold fury. Behind her, the bridge of the UE Sevifiance showed the organized chaos of a command center in the middle of a winning battle. Human officers moved efficiently between stations, their voices steady as they coordinated the destruction of an alien empire. "Commander Vexthul," Katie said, her voice carrying clearly across the void between ships. "I am Admiral Sullivan of the United Earth Defense Force. I'm calling to offer you one chance to surrender." Vexthul looked at the human woman and felt something he had never experienced before in his long military career. Fear mixed with respect. This was not the primitive savage he had expected to face. This was a military leader who had taken his superior force and turned it into scrap metal floating in space. "Your terms?" he asked simply. "Unconditional surrender of all remaining Zephyrian forces in this system. Full disclosure of your empire's military capabilities and locations. And testimony about the 12 species you've destroyed." Vexthul's blood ran cold. Somehow the humans had learned about the other conquests. They knew this was not just about Earth, but about galactic genocide on a massive scale. "And if I refuse?" Katie's expression didn't change. "Then we finish what you started. All of your ships will be destroyed. None of your people will return home to warm your empire. And then we will come for you." The threat hung in space between them like a sword. Vexthul realized that this human female was not making an empty promise. She meant every word. Humanity had proven they could adapt, learn, and fight with a viciousness that no civilized species possessed. If they decided to wage war against the Zephyrian Empire, they would not stop until every alien world was ash. I need time to consider," Vexthul said. "You have 10 minutes," Katie replied, and the transmission ended. Vexthul turned to his remaining officers. Most of them looked as shaken as he felt. Sub-Commander Krita spoke first. "Commander, we should surrender. Our fleet is destroyed. Our crews are demoralized. And these humans, they fight like nothing we've ever seen." "They don't just fight," said his tactical officer quietly. "They learn. Every battle makes them stronger. Every weapon they capture becomes a better weapon in their hands. If we continue this war, they will eventually reach our home worlds." Vexthul nodded slowly. He had come to the same conclusion. The humans were not just another primitive species to be conquered. They were something new and dangerous. Something that could threaten the very existence of the Zephyrian Empire. But before he could respond, alarms began sounding throughout his ship. His remaining fleet was under attack, but not by human ships. Human Marines were boarding every vessel simultaneously, moving through space in small assault craft that his sensors could barely detect. "How are they doing this?" Krita demanded. "Our shields are still up." "They're not trying to get through the shields," the tactical officer reported with amazement. "They're cutting holes in our hulls with some kind of focused beam weapon. They're boarding us through the damage points." Captain Steve Hughes was leading one of those boarding parties, his Marines moving through the corridors of the heavy cruiser Eternal Glory with deadly efficiency. The Zephyrians fought back, but they were not prepared for human close-quarters combat tactics. Where alien soldiers expected orderly firefights, humans brought controlled chaos. They used flashbang grenades to disorient defenders, then attacked. From multiple directions at once, they turned the ship's own systems against its crew, flooding compartments with toxic gases and shutting down life support to force surrenders. "Deck 7 secured," reported Sergeant Chris Evans over the radio. "Deck 8 is putting up resistance, but we've cut their communication lines. They're fighting blind." On the bridge of his flagship, Commander Vexthul watched his fleet fall, apart in real time. Ship after ship reported successful human boarding actions. His crews were surrendering faster than he could receive the reports. "Commander," his communications officer called out. "Admiral Sullivan is transmitting again." Katie's image appeared on screen once more, but this time she was not alone. Behind her stood human Marines, who had clearly been in recent combat, their armor scarred, but their faces determined. "Commander, your time is up," Katie said. "As you can see, my people are already aboard your ships. You can surrender now and leave, or you can force us to take your ship by storm. The choice is yours." Vexthul felt the weight of centuries of Zephyrian military tradition pressing down on him. His species had never surrendered to a primitive enemy. They had conquered 12 worlds and enslaved millions. The idea of submitting to these humans went against everything he had been taught, but he also felt the weight of responsibility for his surviving crews, and he felt the terrible certainty that continuing to fight would not just mean his death, but the doom of his entire species. "I surrender," he said quietly. The words seemed to echo in the sudden silence of his bridge. Around him, his officers began removing their weapons and placing them on the deck. The war was over. 30 minutes later, human Marines led by Colonel Jake Palmer and Captain Roy Jenkins took control of Vexthul's bridge. The commander watched these humans with a mixture of fear and fascination. They moved with confidence and discipline, but there was something else in their eyes. Something that spoke of a species that had learned to fight for survival against impossible odds. Admiral Sullivan arrived on his bridge an hour later. She walked directly to Vexthul, studying him with those cold, intelligent eyes. "You're going to record a message," she told him. "You're going to tell your empire exactly what happened here, and you're going to make sure they understand why it happened." Vexthul nodded slowly. "What do you want me to say?" "The truth, all of it. How you underestimated us. How we adapted to your technology and made it better. How we turned everything in our solar system into a weapon. How we fought with tactics you've never seen before. And most importantly, what will happen to any species that makes the same mistake you did." The recording chamber was prepared quickly. Vexthul sat before the camera, Admiral Sullivan standing behind him just out of view. When the recording began, he spoke slowly and clearly, his words carrying the weight of absolute truth. "To all commanders of the Zephyrian Empire, this is Commander Vexthul speaking from the human solar system. Our invasion has failed completely. Of 50 ships that entered the system, fewer than 15 remain capable of flight. The rest have been destroyed or captured by human forces." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "I must report that our intelligence about this species was catastrophically wrong. Humans are not primitive. They are not weak. They are not predictable. They are the most dangerous enemy we have ever encountered. They do not fight wars the way civilized species fight wars. They turn their entire civilization into a weapon. They convert mining equipment into military hardware. They use tactics that make no sense until you realize they are designed to cause maximum psychological damage to their enemies. Most importantly, they learn. Every weapon they capture becomes a better weapon in their hands. Every battle they fight makes them stronger. They do not just adapt to new technology. They improve it beyond anything we thought possible." Vexthul looked directly into the camera, his 4 eyes conveying the absolute seriousness of his words. "I am sending this message as a warning to our empire, and to any other species that might be listening. Never underestimate humanity. Never attack their civilians. Never threaten their homes. And above all, never provoke humans if you want to. Survive. They are coming. Human fleets are already leading their solar system, equipped with hybrid technology that surpasses our own. They know about the 12 species we conquered. They know about our empire's expansion. And they have decided that we are a threat that must be eliminated. This is not a defeat. This is an extinction event. The humans do not fight to conquer. They fight to ensure their survival, and they will not stop until every threat to their species is gone. The recording ended. Admiral. Sullivan stepped forward. That message will be transmitted to every Zephyrian world, and to any other alien civilization we can reach. Your empire will have the choice of immediate peace negotiations or total war against humanity. Vexthul looked up at her. And if they choose war? Katie's smile was not pleasant. Then they'll learn the same lesson you did, the hard way. 6 months later, the Zephyrian Empire signed a complete surrender agreement. The human fleets that had pursued the retreating aliens were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Ships that combined the best of human and alien technology, crewed by soldiers who had learned to fight against impossible odds and win. Commander. Vexthul's warning became known throughout the galaxy. 12 species that had been enslaved by the Zephyrians were liberated by human forces. Other alien empires, hearing the message, began immediate diplomatic contact with Earth. The galaxy had a new rule, born from the ashes of the Zephyrian fleet. Never provoke humans if you want to. Survive. It was a lesson written in the wreckage of ships and the testimony of a defeated commander, and it ensured that humanity would never again face the threat of extinction from an underestimating enemy. The war that was supposed to destroy humanity had instead made them the galaxy's newest superpower. And Admiral Katie Sullivan stood on the bridge of her flagship, the U's Defiance, watching the largest space battle in human history unfold before her. 30 of Commander Vexthul's remaining ships were approaching Earth in a tight formation. There, weapons charging for what the alien commander believed would be the final assault. He had no idea what was waiting for him. Diana, is Project Prometheus ready? Katie asked the chief scientist standing beside her. Dr. Diane Ross nodded, her face pale but determined. All systems are green, Admiral. Dr. Frank White's team has loaded the antimatter warheads onto 12 missiles. Each one has enough power to crack a planet in half. Katie felt the weight of that responsibility. 3 weeks ago, humanity had been a peaceful species exploring their solar system. Now they had weapons that could destroy worlds. The transformation frightened her, but the memory of those murdered colonists kept her focused. Fleet Captain. Miller, what's the status of our ships? She called to her tactical officer. Captain Tony Miller looked up from his displays, his upgraded systems showing information that would have been impossible to gather before the war. We have 87 ships in fighting condition, Admiral, all equipped with hybrid human Zephyrian technology. Our shields are holding at 100% efficiency. What Tony didn't mention was how those shields had been improved. Human engineers had not just copied alien technology. They had made it better. Where Zephyrian shields were designed for energy weapons, human modifications made them effective against physical projectiles too. Where alien systems failed under overload, human versions kept working. Commander Vexthul was about to discover this the hard way. His tactical officer had assured him that human ships were still inferior to Zephyrian technology. The intelligence reports showed primitive vessels with basic weapons and weak defenses. The reports were 3 days old, which might as well have been 3 years in human development time. Begin the final assault, Vexthul ordered. Target their largest ships first. Once we break their fleet, the planet will surrender. The alien weapons fired in perfect coordination, sending enough destructive energy to vaporize a small moon toward the human fleet. Vexthul watched the energy beams reach their targets and waited for the satisfying explosions that would mark the end of human resistance. Instead, he watched in growing horror as human shields absorbed the attack without failing. The energy that should have destroyed those ships was redirected harmlessly into space. His most powerful weapons had done nothing more than light up the human defenses. Impossible, he whispered. Our weapons should have cut through those shields, like they were made of paper. Commander, his weapons officer reported with a shaking voice. The humans are returning fire. Energy signatures are... Sir, those readings can't be correct. The human counterattack began with conventional weapons that hit harder than anything Vexthel had seen before. Human plasma cannons improved with. Zephyrian technology punched through alien shields that had never failed before. Railguns firing projectiles at incredible speeds tore holes in hulls designed to withstand planetary bombardment. But the real shock came when Captain Tony Miller's ship fired something completely new. The weapon looked like a standard human missile, but it was carrying an antimatter warhead that Dr. Frank White had designed using both human and alien technology. When it hit the Zephyrian heavy cruiser Thunder of Empire, the explosion could be seen from Earth with the naked eye. Direct hit on Target 1, Tony reported calmly. Target completely destroyed. No survivors detected. Vexthel stared at the empty space where one of his most powerful ships had been moments before. The Thunder of Empire had shields that could stop planet-killing weapons. It had armor that could withstand the heat of a star. It had simply ceased to exist. What was that weapon? He demanded. His science officer was frantically scanning the debris field. Commander, I'm reading traces of antimatter annihilation. The humans have developed planet-killer weapons. Sir, if they have more of those, how many more ships do we have? Vexthel asked quietly. 29 combat-capable vessels, Commander. But, sir, our morale is breaking. 3 ships have already requested permission to withdraw. For the first time in his military career, Commander Vexthel felt real fear. Not fear of death, which was an honorable risk for any soldier, but fear of the enemy he was fighting. These humans were not just technologically advanced. They were ruthless in ways that civilized species were not supposed to be. The fear got worse when human Marines began boarding his ships. Captain Steve Hughes led the assault on the destroyer Silver Talon, and what his team did there became legend among both human and Zephyrian forces. Human Marines had trained for boarding actions, but they had never fought aliens before. They adapted quickly. Where Zephyrian soldiers expected orderly combat in ship corridors, humans brought chaos. They used explosives to blow holes in walls, creating new routes through the ship. They turned life support systems into weapons, flooding compartments with toxic gases. Sergeant Chris Evans and his squad cornered a group of Zephyrian soldiers in the ship's main reactor room. Instead of a traditional firefight, Chris ordered his men to disable the artificial gravity and attack in 3 dimensions. The aliens, used to fighting on solid ground, were helpless against enemies who could fight on walls and ceilings. Surrender. Chris called out in broken Zephyrian, "Your ship is ours." The alien soldiers, terrified by fighting they could not understand, threw down their weapons. Word of their surrender spread through the Zephyrian fleet faster than official communications. Stories grew with each telling. Human soldiers who fought like demons. Weapons that turned ships into vapor. Tactics that made no sense, but always worked. Marine Commander Lara Davis was leading another boarding party on the cruiser Dark Wing when she made a discovery that changed everything. In the ship's database, she found detailed records of other species the Zephyrians had conquered. 12 different civilizations had been enslaved or destroyed by the Empire. Admiral Sullivan, Lara transmitted back to the flagship. "You need to see this. These aliens aren't just invading us. They've done this before, 12 times. Katie felt cold anger replace her earlier fear. This was not a war of conquest. This was genocide on a galactic scale. The Zephyrians had destroyed entire civilizations for no reason other than expansion and greed. "Broadcast that information to all human forces," she ordered. "Make sure everyone knows what we're really fighting." The Effect on human morale was immediate and dramatic. Soldiers who had been fighting to defend their homes now knew they were fighting to prevent humanity from becoming the 13th species on the Zephyrian list of conquests, not Captain Roy Jenkins, commanding a squadron of modified mining ships. Received the broadcast just as he was preparing to ram his Epherian battleship. The knowledge that his enemy had committed genocide against 12 other species removed any remaining doubt about what needed to be done. All ships, this is Jenkins. Remember those colony transports they destroyed. Remember the families on those. Ships, remember the 12 species that came before us. Make them pay for all of it. The mining ships struck the battleship in perfect coordination, their hulls packed with explosives and their crews ready to die for their species. The explosion took out not just the battleship, but 2 escort ships as well. But it was the psychological impact that mattered most. Zephyrian crews watched human ships sacrifice themselves without hesitation, their crews singing war songs as they died. The aliens had conquered 12 species, but they had never faced one that fought like this. Commander Vex Thul received surrender requests from 8 of his remaining ships within the next hour. Their captains reported that their crews were refusing to fight. Some had barricaded themselves in their quarters. Others were demanding to be evacuated. Commander, Sub-Commander Krita, approached him carefully. Perhaps we should consider withdrawal. We could return with reinforcements. No, Vexthal said quietly. Look at the tactical display. Look at what they've done to us. We came here with 50 ships. We have fewer than 20 left, and half of those want to surrender. These humans have not just defeated us. They've become stronger by fighting us. He was right. Human ships that had been damaged in the early battles were returning to combat. With improved designs, their weapons were more powerful. Their tactics were more effective. Their crews were more experienced. The war that was supposed to weaken humanity was making them into something the galaxy had never seen before. Sir, his communications officer called out. We're receiving a transmission from the human flagship. Admiral Sullivan wants to speak. With you directly. Vexthul looked around his command center at the officers who had served him faithfully through 12 conquests. They were beaten, and they all knew it. The only question now was whether they would survive to learn from their mistake. Put her through, he said. General Rick Thompson had not slept in 3 days. He stood in the war room on Earth, surrounded by screens showing factories, shipyards, and mining operations across human space. Every few minutes, new reports came in of civilian facilities being converted to military production. What he was watching had never been seen before in galactic history. Paula, what's the status on the Detroit conversion? He asked the woman at the next station. Engineer Paula Davis looked up from her tablet, her eyes red from exhaustion but bright with determination. The old car factories are now producing missile launchers. The steel plants are making armor plating. Even the food processing plants are manufacturing explosive compounds. We've increased our military production by 800% in 2 days. Rick nodded grimly. When Admiral Sullivan had declared war, every human settlement had responded the same way. Civilian factories stopped making cars and started making weapons. Mining stations began producing military materials instead of consumer goods. Research labs dropped everything to focus on weapons development. The Zephyrians had expected a quick victory over a weak, divided species. Instead, they were facing an entire civilization that had transformed itself into a war machine almost. Overnight. Commander Vex Thul was beginning to understand this as he read the latest reports from his scouts. Sub-Commander, these numbers cannot be correct. Yesterday, the humans had 200 ships. Today, they report over 500 armed vessels in their system. Krita checked her data twice before answering. The numbers are correct, Commander. It appears they are converting civilian ships to military use at an incredible rate. Their cargo haulers now carry weapons. Their passenger ships have become troop transports. Even their garbage scows are being used to ram our ships. Garbage. Scows? Vexthu's voice rose in disbelief. Yes, Commander. A human waste disposal ship successfully rammed one of our destroyers yesterday. The ship was filled with explosives and detonated on impact. Vexthul felt a chill run through his body. In all his campaigns, he had never seen anything like this. Civilized species kept their military and civilian sectors separate. They followed rules of war that made sense. These humans seemed to think everything could be turned into a weapon. He was more right than he knew. On Europa Station, Commander Carl Fisher was proving exactly that point. The station was a mining and research facility built into the ice moon's surface. It had never been designed for war, but Carl was making it into a fortress anyway. Helen, how are those chemical compounds coming along? He asked Dr. Helen Ward, the station's chief scientist. Helen looked up from her laboratory workbench, where she was mixing chemicals that had never been combined before. I've got something that eats through their hull material like acid through paper. The problem is getting it onto their ships. Leave that to me, Carl said with a grim smile. What about the magnetic containment system? Roy's got it working as a railgun. We can fire chunks of ice at nearly light speed. It's not pretty, but it works. Captain Roy Jenkins had been the station's mining foreman until 3 days ago. Now he was their weapons officer, using industrial equipment in ways it was never meant to be used. The magnetic systems designed to contain plasma for mining operations now launched projectiles with devastating force. When Vexthul's forces attacked Europa Station, they expected to overwhelm a research facility defended by scientists and miners. Instead, they found themselves facing weapons they couldn't identify or counter. Industrial lasers cut through their ship's armor. Mining explosives tore holes in their hulls. Worst of all, the humans seemed to be making up new tactics as they went along. They're using their ice processing plant as a weapon, reported the Zephyrian attack coordinator. They're shooting frozen projectiles at our ships. Our shields can't stop solid matter moving at those speeds. Then destroy the station, Vexthul ordered. We're trying, Commander. But they've hidden most of their weapons inside the moon itself. Every time we target one system, 3 more appear from different locations and serve ... They're using their communication system to broadcast music at us. Music? Human war songs. Commander, they're drowning out our communications with something called rock and roll. Vexthul closed his eyes and tried to remain calm. This was psychological warfare, something no civilized species engaged in. The humans were not just trying to defeat his ships. They were trying to drive his crews insane. The worst part was that it was working. Zephyrian soldiers were used to clean, organized battles with predictable enemies. They were not prepared for humans who sang while they fought, who turned garbage into bombs, and who seemed to enjoy the chaos of war. Colonel Nancy. Price was making the psychological warfare even more effective. She had captured several Zephyrian communication devices and was using them to spread confusion through the alien fleet. Attention Zephyrian ships, she broadcast on their command frequency, perfectly mimicking their language patterns. This is Fleet Commander Zixnal. All ships proceed to coordinate 77 Alpha for immediate tactical restructuring. Half the alien fleet changed course before their real commanders could correct the false orders. Ships collided as they tried to follow contradictory instructions. Confusion spread through their formations as officers argued about which orders were real. Commander Vexthul, came a panicked transmission from one of his ship captains. We're receiving orders from multiple sources. Half of them contradict each other. We don't know which commands are authentic. Vexthul realized with growing horror that the humans had not just broken their communication codes. They were using those codes against them, turning their own command structure into a weapon. This was beyond unconventional warfare. This was strategic thinking on a level he had never encountered, but the humans were just getting started. Dr. Amy Carter had finished her analysis of Zephyrian technology, and what she had discovered was changing everything. General Thompson, she reported from Titan Research Station, I've figured out how their shields work. More importantly, I've figured out how to make them work better. Better how? Rick asked. We can't just copy their technology. We can improve it. Human engineering approaches problems differently than theirs. They build systems that work perfectly under ideal conditions. We build systems that work when everything goes wrong. She was right. Human technology had evolved on a world where Murphy's Law ruled everything. If something could break, it would break, usually at the worst possible moment. So humans built their machines tough, simple, and easy to repair. Zephyrian technology was elegant and efficient, but it was also fragile. When human engineers started modifying it, they made it stronger, more flexible, and harder to break. Captain Tony Miller was the first to test the improved systems on his ship, the U.E.'s Freedom. The hybrid human-alien technology worked better than anyone had hoped. His ship's shields could now absorb damage that would have destroyed him before. His weapons hit harder and recharged faster. His engines were more powerful and more reliable. General, Tony reported after his first combat test, we're not just matching their technology anymore. We're beating it. The modifications Dr. Carter designed make everything work better than the originals. Rick felt a smile cross his face for the first time since the war began. How long before we can upgrade the entire fleet? Paula says 3 days for the first wave, a week for everyone, but they wouldn't need a week. Commander Vexthal was about to make a fatal mistake. Frustrated by his losses and confused by human tactics, he decided to concentrate his remaining forces for one massive assault on Earth itself. He thought overwhelming firepower would end the war quickly. Instead, he was about to give humanity the chance to show him what they could really do when their backs were against the wall. On Luna Station, Admiral Caddy Sullivan watched the alien fleet massing for their final attack. She looked around at her officers, all of them tired but determined. They had learned to fight a war none of them had imagined possible. Now they would learn to win it. All ships, she broadcast to the human fleet. This is it. They're coming. With everything they have. Time to show them why you never threaten Earth. Commander Vexthal stood in his command center, watching his fleet move toward the inner planets. 50 of the Empire's finest warships spread out in perfect formation, their weapons charged and shields at full power. Each ship could destroy a city with a single shot. Together, they had enough firepower to turn entire worlds into dust. Sub-Commander Krita, he called to his second officer. What is the status of human resistance? Krita checked her screens and made a dismissive sound. Minimal, Commander. They have perhaps 200 small ships scattered throughout their system. Most appear to be cargo vessels and mining ships. Their largest warship is less than 1/10 the size of our smallest destroyer. And their weapons? Primitive chemical, explosives, and basic energy beams. Our shields will stop anything they can throw at us. Our intelligence estimates we could destroy their entire fleet in less than 6 hours. Vexthal nodded with satisfaction. This was exactly what he expected. In his experience, primitive species always followed the same pattern. First came denial, then panic, and desperate attacks with their weak weapons. Finally came surrender and begging for mercy. The humans were already in the second stage. What the commander didn't know was that Lieutenant Colonel Jake Palmer was watching his fleet from Mars orbit. Jake commanded the Outer System Defense Force, a collection of ships that looked exactly as primitive as the aliens thought they were. But looks could be deceiving. "Lisa," he called to Commander Lisa Brooks, who was piloting a small fighter near the asteroid belt. "What do you see out there?" Lisa's voice came through the radio with barely controlled excitement. 50 big ships, Jake. They're moving in a straight line formation, real organized and predictable. They're not even trying to scan for smaller threats. Perfect. These aliens fight like they're in a parade. Johnson, what's the word from your mining teams? Captain Steve Hughes answered from his position near Ceres. "We've got 47 mining ships ready to go. The aliens don't know we've been using these things to move asteroids for years. They probably think they're just hauling rocks." Jake smiled grimly. The aliens were about to learn their first lesson about human warfare. Humans had been fighting each other for thousands of years. They knew every dirty trick, every sneaky tactic, and every way to turn weakness into strength. "All units, this is Palmer. Execute Plan Chaos." Across the solar system, human ships began to move. But they didn't charge at the alien fleet like brave knights. Instead, they scattered like scared rabbits, hiding behind asteroids and planets and moons. The aliens saw exactly what they expected to see: a weaker enemy running away in panic. Commander Vexthul watched the human retreat with amusement. "They flee before we even fire a shot. This is almost too easy." "Should we pursue, Commander?" asked his weapons officer. "Not yet. Let them scatter. It will make them easier to hunt down individually. Focus our advance on their main planet. Once we control Earth, the rest will surrender without a fight." This was exactly what Jake Palmer was counting on. While the main alien fleet headed for Earth, the real battle was beginning in the outer system. Lisa Brooks led her squadron of fighters through the asteroid belt, using the rocky debris as cover. Her ships were small and fast, painted black to blend with space. The aliens couldn't see them coming. The first Zephyrian supply ship never knew what hit it. Lisa's squadron appeared from behind a large asteroid, fired every missile they had, and disappeared before the aliens could react. The supply ship's shields flashed and failed under the concentrated attack. Secondary explosions tore through its hull as its ammunition stores cooked off. "Supply convoy Delta is under attack," came the panicked report to Commander Vexthul. "Multiple small craft using asteroid cover. We've lost one ship completely." Vexthul frowned. This wasn't part of the usual pattern. Most primitive species made desperate frontal attacks, not coordinated ambushes. Send 2 destroyers to deal with them. But when the destroyers arrived, the human fighters were gone. They found only empty space and asteroid debris. The aliens spent hours searching, while more supply ships were attacked in other parts of the system. Meanwhile, something even more troubling was happening on Titan Research Station. Dr. Amy Carter was one of Earth's best scientists, and she had pieces of Zephyrian technology from the destroyed colony ships. While the fleet was fighting, she was learning. "This is incredible," she told her team as they examined alien metal fragments. "Look at this crystal matrix. It's like nothing we've ever seen, but I think I understand how it works. If we can replicate this energy pattern." Her assistant, Dr. Frank White, looked up from his computer. "Amy, we've cracked part of their shield frequency. It's complex, but there's a resonance pattern here. If we can match it, we can punch right through their defenses." Amy finished with a grin. "How long do you need?" "Give me 12 hours. While the scientists worked, Captain Steve Hughes was leading a very different kind of mission. His mining ships had been modified. In the past few hours, their ore haulers were placed with weapons cobbled together from industrial equipment. They looked like junk, but Steve knew they would work. "Remember, boys," he told his crews over the radio, "these alien ships are tough, but they're not expecting us to ram them. Wait until they drop their shields to fire, then hit them with everything." The mining ships moved slowly toward a group of Zephyrian scouts, looking like civilian vessels. Fleeing in panic, the aliens took the bait completely. They moved in close, ready to capture what they thought were helpless cargo ships. Instead, they found themselves facing industrial plasma cutters that could slice through battleship armor, and magnetic launchers that fired chunks of metal at incredible speed. The mining ships weren't armed for war, but humans had turned their work tools into weapons. 2 alien scouts were destroyed before they realized what was happening. The third managed to escape, but its hull was badly damaged, and its crew was in shock. "Commander," the surviving scout captain reported to Vexthul, "the humans, they're not fighting like any species we've encountered. They use their civilian ships as weapons. They hide and attack from ambush. They modify industrial tools for combat." Vexthul felt the first stirring of unease. In all his campaigns, primitive species had followed predictable patterns. They fought, bravely but stupidly, using conventional tactics that were easy to counter. These humans were doing something different, something unpredictable. "How many ships have we lost?" he asked his tactical officer. 7 destroyed, 4 badly damaged, and sir, we're having communication problems. Our supply lines are being constantly attacked. The humans seem to know where our ships are going before we send them." What Vexthul didn't know was that Captain Tony Miller had been monitoring Zephyrian communications from the beginning. Human computers were designed to break codes and find patterns. It had taken them less than 6 hours to crack the alien communication system. "Palmer, this is Miller," Tony broadcast on a secure channel. "I've got their next 3 moves. They're sending a heavy cruiser to Jupiter and 2 destroyers to the belt. Lisa can hit the destroyers while Steve takes the cruiser." Jake Palmer looked at his tactical display and felt something he hadn't expected when this war started. Hope. The aliens were stronger and had better weapons, but they were fighting by rules that humans had never learned. They expected their enemies to be honorable and predictable. They were about to learn that humans were neither. "All units," Jake broadcast to the human fleet. "Phase 2 is a go. Time to show these aliens what happens when you mess with Earth." The massive alien ship moved through space like a dark shadow against the stars. It was bigger than any human city, with twisted metal spires and glowing red lights that pulsed like a heartbeat. Inside the command center, Commander Vexthul stood before a wall of screens showing the small blue planet ahead. His purple skin gleamed under the harsh lights, and his 4 eyes studied the data scrolling past. "Another primitive world," he said to his officers. His voice was deep and rough, like grinding stone. "The reports say these humans barely leave their own star system. They use chemical rockets and simple weapons. This will be easy." Sub-Commander Krita, his second-in-command, nodded her scaled head. "The intelligence shows they have only colonized a few planets and moons. Their technology is at least 500 years behind ours. They won't even know we're here until it's too late." Vexthul smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. In his long career, he had conquered 12 different species for the Zephyrian Empire. Each time was the same story. The aliens would see his mighty fleet, panic, and surrender within days. Sometimes within hours. The humans would be no different. "Prepare. The surrender demand," he ordered, standard format. "Tell them to submit to Zephyrian rule or face destruction. Make sure they understand we are being generous by giving them this choice." Far away on Luna Station, Admiral Katie Sullivan was having a very different kind of morning. She was drinking coffee and reading reports when the alarm started blaring. Red lights flashed throughout the command center as officers rushed to their stations. "Admiral!" Lieutenant Commander Pete Johnson called from his station. "We're picking up a massive signature on the edge of the system. It's huge, ma'am. Bigger than anything we've ever seen." Katie set down her coffee and walked to the main display. The screen showed a three-dimensional map of the solar system, with a large red dot moving slowly toward Earth. Numbers scrolled beside it, showing size, mass, and estimated speed. "How big?" she asked. 15 kilometers long, Admiral. Maybe more. It's not like any ship design in our databases. Katie felt her stomach tighten. Humanity had always wondered if they were alone in the universe. Now they had their answer, and it was coming right at them. "Get me Captain Morrison on the Independence. Alert all ships to defensive positions. And wake up everyone in the defense. Console, now." On board the UES Independence, Captain Ben Morrison was already studying the alien vessel through his ship's telescopes. The Independence was one of Earth's newest ships, built for exploration and first contact. It had powerful sensors and communication equipment designed for peaceful meetings with alien life. Ben had always hoped he would be the one to make first contact. He just wished it was under better circumstances. "Try all communication frequencies," he ordered his communications officer. "Send the standard first contact package. Mathematical sequences, basic pictures, peaceful intentions. Let them know we want to talk." The response came faster than expected. But it wasn't what Ben was hoping for. The alien message was transmitted directly to every human ship and station in the system. The voice was translated by their computers, but the tone was clear, even through the electronic conversion. "Primitive. Humans of the third planet. I am Commander Vexthil of the Zephyrian Empire. Your system now belongs to us. You will surrender all military vessels immediately and prepare your worlds for occupation. You have one of your hours to comply. Resistance will result in the destruction of your species." The message ended with coordinates and technical specifications, showing the overwhelming firepower of the alien fleet. Ben stared at the data. The alien ship had weapons that could destroy planets. Their shields could stop anything humans could throw at them. Their technology was so advanced it might as well have been magic. "Sir," his communications officer said quietly, "Admiral Sullivan is requesting a response." Ben thought about his wife and children back on Earth. He thought about the millions of people who had no idea their world was about to change forever. He thought about the human colonies on Mars and Europa, filled with families who had risked everything to build new homes among the stars. "Tell Admiral Sullivan we're going to try diplomacy first," he said. "Open a channel to the alien commander." When the connection was established, Ben spoke carefully. "Commander Vexthul, this is Captain Ben Morrison of the United Earth Defense Force. We received your message. We're a peaceful species and would like to discuss terms. Perhaps we can find a solution that works for everyone." The aliens' laughter came through the speakers like grinding metal. "Peaceful? You have warships, human, but they are toys compared to our power. I will demonstrate what happens to those who refuse the Empire's generosity." On the command screen, Ben watched 3 red dots separate from the main alien ship. They were small compared to the massive vessel, but still larger than any human ship. The targets were clear from their course. 3 colony transports heading to the outer system, filled with families seeking new homes. "No," Ben shouted into the communicator. "Those are civilian ships. They have children aboard." But it was too late. The alien fighters reached the colony. Ships in minutes. 3 bright flashes lit up the darkness of space, and then there was nothing. 15,000 innocent people were dead. "That was your lesson in obedience." Vexthul's voice came through the speaker. "Surrender now, or every human world will burn." Back on Luna Station, Admiral Katie Sullivan watched the destruction with cold fury. The alien commander thought he was teaching humans about fear. Instead, He had just taught them about war. She turned to her officers, and they could see something dangerous in her eyes. "Activate Protocol 7, she said quietly. "Full military mobilization. Contact every ship, every station, every colony. Tell them we're at war." Around the solar system, human response was swift. Mining ships began converting to carry weapons. Cargo vessels started loading Marines instead of supplies. Scientists dropped their research to work on military projects. The alien commander thought he was facing a weak, divided species. He was about to learn how wrong he was.